Coming up on Over a Barrel, tariffs plus crude oil prices are falling and why gas prices are going down, and magically I'm not happy about that. I know, the world's upside down. We've got Over a Barrel, which starts right now. Well, welcome to the program. I'm one of the two hosts, Matt McLean. Patrick DeHaan joining us on the other side of your screen / other channel of your radio. I don't know. I mean, we're in stereo, so we're coming out of both speakers.
On the left side, it's kind of like the old football announcers. He's left to right on the radio now.
There you go. How are you doing, Patrick? I know you've had a very lots changed since our last podcast. You've had a lot going on over the past week, as we all have. I've been dodging, as they would say in the Upper South, I've been dodging tornadoes, if you will, and you've been dodging tariffs and crude oil prices.
I've been trying to dodge tariffs. That one's been a little bit tougher. I'll tell you what I've been trying to dodge is looking at my 401k. As some of my friends and family would know, it's not been, and probably a lot of Americans have been trying to do that too, as we've been navigating the ups and downs. But there have been quite a few ups and downs over the last week.
Well, let's dive into some of that. So I said in the outset, gas prices are starting to fall, at least in my area, and magically somehow I'm not happy about it. You know me, $1.99 a gallon. I gave up on my 99 cents a gallon, but $1.99 I've been begging and pleading. Magically, somehow this is not making me happy. I know nobody can ever make me happy, right? So, I mean, what's going on here? I'm seeing crude oil prices dropping below $60 a gallon. I'm seeing here a tariff, there a tariff, everywhere a tariff, and everybody is all trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Like I said, lots changed since our last episode. Run down through some of these things with us and help us figure it out.
Well, there have been two main complexities you and I have spoken on in the past. Summer gasoline, the seasonal transition, which pushes prices up. And now we have what's happening in Washington, D.C. with the tariffs pushing prices down. So there's kind of this tug of war. And depending on where you are in the country, like the West Coast of the U.S., areas like California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona have seen prices increasing. Really, California, if I look at California, up 23 cents a gallon in the last month. At the same time, the national average is only up 15 cents. So refinery issues on the West Coast. Prices also jumping in the Northeast, Matt. Pennsylvania up 7 cents in the last week, up 14 cents in the last month. That's because of the seasonal changeover. So there's a lot of levers, and depending on where you are in the country, it depends on what levers. California, it's the refinery lever. The northeastern states, Pennsylvania, it's the switch over to summer gasoline lever. And the Great Lakes prices are declining. All of this to say, to your point, I mean, we're kind of seeing several levers play out depending on where you are. But you mentioned the big one that changed abruptly in the last week was President Trump's broad and more extensive tariffs than expected. Now, we highlighted 6 months ago on this program the possibility of tariffs on Canadian oil. That hasn't happened. We highlighted at the time that there would be a risk of gas prices going up if there was a tariff on Canadian oil and Canadian refined products. There hasn't been either of those. So there hasn't been any upside to gas prices because of tariffs. On the other side of things, there's actually been a tremendous amount of downside on oil prices now because of the tariffs, which look completely different than they did when they were paused, over a month ago. So now we're contending with significant tariffs, especially on Asian countries. And those tariffs are now really escalating the potential of an economic slowdown, which is why the stock market has plummeted so significantly, because tariffs are a tax. They make it more expensive on consumers to buy things. Consumers therefore buy less, and that starts the economy to go into what's the word I'm looking for? Degrowth mode, essentially. As the economy starts slowing down, we start to enter a potential recession, and that's why gas and oil prices have been plummeting. Not only that, but OPEC raised production over the last month. They've started restoring production, and just in the last week, they've now said that they're going to aggressively work on restoring oil production. So they're essentially being more aggressive at restoring production compared to where they were just a couple of weeks ago. So oil prices also declining on that. So to your point, tremendous amount of headlines that are all impacting oil. It's the tariff impact now that's going to likely start pushing prices down coast to coast. But that does not mean that the other levers are frozen. There's still the seasonal trends. There's still refinery issues in California. But for now, the oil lever has moved so far that it's kind of offsetting the smaller movements in those other levers. So hopefully
It's a
that all
lot.
makes sense.
It's a lot, and then you also have the president saying, "quote Don't be weak," unquote, when it comes to the tariffs, and wondering what's going on. Markets not reacting to some of those comments very well,
Doubling
understandably.
down. I mean, it's essentially, and here's the interesting thing, Matt, is because this is going to become a little bit more political. So I'm going to let other words speak more powerfully than mine. We have some very significant pro-Trump allies that have now lined up against tariffs. I'm going to pull up some of them. Bill Ackman was basically one of the biggest Trump supporters in the last campaign segment, and now he is lining up at saying or suggesting that the tariffs are moving in the wrong direction. Now, he understands where President Trump is coming from. Across the board, tariffs for the special privilege of doing business with the U.S., as I read one of his tweets, he agrees with, but he essentially disagrees with the what seemingly rash way of how the Trump administration is going about it. Because I think a lot of folks agree that if countries are basically unfairly trading with the U.S., China has been one of them, that both Biden and Trump have said China is not fair trading with the U.S. They're stealing intellectual property. I think both parties can agree something needs to be done, but it's in the way it's happening that some of these very staunch allies are saying no. I mean, Elon Musk has said free trade is necessary, and he's actually called Trump's trading secretary, Peter Navarro, names several times today, said he's dumb as rocks, he's a moron. So even within Trump's administration, Matt, we have a lot of disagreement here. And what is in the fold is the broad U.S. economy. If we see these tariffs implemented, I mean, the stock market has plummeted because of the way this is happening. Not to say I disagree. It's just the market is reacting because there's been a very strong reaction from the White House on moving forward with this.
So I actually just sent you this particular link that I'm getting ready to quote from Republicans, U.S. Senator Tom Tillis, when grilling the Trump administration in a Senate hearing moments ago. And again, Republican to Republican, quote, "Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves
Yeah.
to be wrong regarding the sweeping tariffs with no exceptions?" The senator from the great state of North Carolina in that area. So even the Republican base isn't necessarily the most happy right now with what's going on. And then you have the infighting. Then you have basically, if if I'm looking at this from a general American consumer and also a business owner mindset, the markets right now look quite manic in nature because it's nobody knows exactly in their next breath what's going to happen. And so they're trying to either sell or buy in the markets right now, be it stocks or whatever. I mean, just
Yeah.
take your pick. Treasuries, bonds, crude oil price. I mean, like everything is just up, it's down, it's left, it's sideways. It's really, really tough. I don't envy the job that you are in right now. And I don't envy the fact that you are the petroleum. I mean, you are the gas buddy guy. Literally, that is your handle on X. And you have really built many years as a reputation of being the go-to individual for petroleum analysis. This cannot possibly be an easy.
Well,
I've known you for
put it
years.
yesterday.
This has to be hard for you.
Well, it is because, yesterday, a terrific example of that is I pull up an article from the Wall Street Journal on opinion, which is the Wall Street Journal tends to lean conservative. So, and this is an opinion piece, but essentially yesterday, Matt, we had that moment where there was a tweet that basically said Peter Navarro, who's Trump's trade secretary, said that they were going to pause tariffs for 90 days. And the stock market went from being down 3 or 4% to being up 3%. And then the president said the White House essentially on social media saying that was fake news. Then the stock market went right back down. So just imagine, doing interviews on this yesterday, saying that oil prices are tanking and gas prices are going to go down, then seeing that tweet and completely having to go back to the drawing board, trying to understand what's happening, if it's real. There were a couple interviews until the White House said it was fake news, where it's like, is this real? So the headlines are just flying so far all over the place. And by the way, another really interesting piece, Matt, from the Wall Street Journal, the other article, basically going through the Republicans who forgot their economics. The same folks that are now apparently pro-tariffs are kind of forgetting their backgrounds. And one of them, senator from Wyoming, essentially campaigned and was telling the Wall Street Journal, sharing essentially that free trade is such a great thing and that tariffs are terrible. And now look, a lot of them are lining up on the other side of the aisle. Republican Senator John Bassaro of Wyoming pretends tariffs are a swell idea. Back in the day, he was many of the Republicans to support the Trans-Pacific Partnership, an agreement that would have entered the U.S. and 11 Pacific Rim countries into a free trade agreement. So it's really interesting here, Matt. The currency of integrity is being lost. The Wall Street Journal, Republicans who forgot their economics, and then Trump is trashing America's reputation. That's the worry here, is that there's a lot at stake. I talk about it from a lens of the oil market, but this is why oil markets have plummeted in recent days. It's because of all the drama coming from the White House. It's the uncertainty. And you mentioned it best as a business owner. What the heck? You don't know what's going to happen. And reacting to this, it's like a lot of unneeded stress. A lot of Americans have way too much stress already, thinking if they're going to have a job, right? A lot of Americans have been let go from their positions. Unemployment is still good, but a lot of companies have been doing reductions in workforce.
Well, and I think I can speak on behalf of a multitude of business owners right now, and I've mentioned this on the podcast multiple times, my 30, 60, 90, 6-month rule, as far as how you forecast. I've added a couple of layers to that, which is daily and weekly, and I'm not joking when I say that, and I am actually one of many, doing what I do for a living beyond. I love doing this podcast with you, and it's all part of what we do, video production, marketing, all that stuff, right? Yeah. So we have clients, right? And it's been kind of one of the things that we've recommended, your 30, 60, 90, 6 months, let's add a few extra layers, a daily and a weekly, and figuring out what you can and can't do, because that's really some of the best ways that you can try to protect your own business and your interests. And I will say one more thing before you even bring up what you've just pulled up there on the New York Post. One other thing, I spent so many years and decades, and I have clients ask me this all the time, and I won't tell them. You know the answer to this because you and I have been friends for a long time, but Democrats usually think I'm a Republican, and Republicans usually think I'm a Democrat. In other words, I try very hard to remain as neutral as possible in a
that's terrific. And when people think, when both sides of the aisle think you're the opposite, it really suggests that you've done a good job and
exactly
balancing it.
In the news media, anchoring news and reporting news for 25 years, nobody ever knew what my personal politics were, and I firmly believe that's where we ought to be. I am going to take an opinion on that. I don't often take public opinions, but I will take one on that. I think our news media definitely needs to always, no one should ever know what that reporter's political feelings are in the way that they report, right? So I've carried that mantra on into my business operations as well. Mine are mine. You know what they are because I know you, and you and I have known each other for years.
Well, and again, you're not going to be to your point. You're not going to be good at what you're doing if you show an allegiance to either side, because you're going to be blindsided. But and great point there to focus on the New York Post, which
exactly.
Again, another very, very conservative outlet, highlighting what I said. Bill Ackman has been a huge supporter of Trump. When he warns that the world is on the brink of a self-induced economic nuclear winter. This is from somebody so Trump. Now, keep in mind, I think Peter Navarro is hell-bent on these tariffs for whatever reason. I don't know. Elon Musk has even ripped him. Look at on the right side of this headline, trending now in U.S. news. Elon Musk rips, quote, moron Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro dumber than a sack of bricks. So, again, we share these because these explain exactly why the price of oil is down $10 a barrel, and why your lead into this episode was why you're not happy is because the $10 barrel drop in oil comes amidst these headlines. The two are hand in hand. Nobody wants a self-induced economic nuclear winter. Right. I love cheap gas, but not when it's associated with a major downturn in the U.S. economy. So
not when no one has the money to put gasoline in their vehicles. I mean, I love cheap gas, but you want the money to spend, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So these are the things, honestly, that keep me up at night. And in my internal meetings with my own folks, and I know that these, and so I'm giving that, I think, real world experience for a lot of people that may be watching, maybe they're executives in business and whatever the case may be. They know exactly what I'm talking about right now, because it's, well, okay, let's make sure that we're doing this, this, and this. Let's prepare for that. Let's prepare for this. And basically an all hands on deck approach. And yes, even Trump allies fear that he's leading America into a recession with his tariffs. Here are some off ramps. That's out of Fortune magazine there. You've got so much stuff that you kind of wonder what's going on. And then again, optics are everything, especially in everything that you do. As critical as this may sound, probably not the best idea to go on a 4-day golf adventure while the markets are starting to melt down over things. And people can, again, I'm not trying to play sides. I'm just trying to point to factual optics, not always the best there. So you've got these things going on. You wonder what's kind of taking place here. You've got the tariffs that are in place and a doubling down of tariffs, like you mentioned with China, for example. The president levied tariffs. China's like, oh, yeah, well, we'll see your tariffs and we're going to do this. And then he goes back and says, well, you better not do that, because if you do this, then I'm going to raise them even more. I saw a headline somewhere, something about 104% tariffs from the U.S. toward
Yes,
China. Is that
104% on China. That is correct now, because President Trump essentially said, if China retaliates, I'm going to up it even more. So, we are in essentially a trade war with China now. And that's the risk here, Matt, is I pull up another headline. Even Elon Musk is hoping for Europe and the U.S. to move to zero tariffs. Free trade is a Republican viewpoint. I'm not sure why they've lost their identity. Generally, when politicians lose their identity to somebody else, it's not going to end well. I'm not going to analyze that. But again, all of this to highlight that people near President Trump are very concerned about this take, because it could end very badly. And that is why oil prices have tanked over the last week. And that's why, when we like low gas, we don't like it to be associated with these types of headlines. So oil prices are tanking not because of some great thing Trump has done, but because there's a risk of a global trade war, which will induce likely a very much slowed down U.S. economy.
I think that's a particularly safe situation to possibly land on for a petroleum analyst to say. I think there's something right there for you to hang your hat on, no question about it. Then you've also got the possibility, rumors and whatnot, but it's actually making news headlines in some reputable places of are we going to do something with Iran, militarily speaking? I've even seen some valid headlines indicating from NBC News of possibly using drone strikes for Mexican cartels inside Mexico's territory. That, I would hope, would be with the blessing of the Mexican government at this particular point, being a sovereign nation.
I would think so. The U.S. and Mexico, the U.S. and Mexico, it seems like, by the way, the fascinating thing about this all is how Mexico has been rather masterful at working with Trump and not escalating the situation. And now look, Mexico, we were worried about tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Canada is in the middle of an election cycle. Both of their politicians are now both still engaged in saying, essentially that, they are not going to bow to Trump. Mexico, on the other hand, has been fascinating. They've been dealing with President Trump, and look at President Trump praise for Mexico thus far has been somewhat surprising.
Yeah, so let's look at this screen here. Last week at this time, oil was over $70 a barrel during our last episode. Now, even earlier, it was at like 59 something right before we began recording. So this is a live view. Obviously, we're live to tape in this regard. So however it closes for today and this week, it may not be conducive to what you're seeing on your screen at $60.05 right now. But oil prices,
Look at that, down 16% the past 5 days, down 11%. And by the way, the other thing is an oil analyst, Matt, when oil prices fall, oil producers, if you've looked at the stock market, if you looked at some of the companies like ExxonMobil and BP, their share price is it's not gone up the last week. Oil prices tank. That is going to lead to lower oil profits, which will lead to less oil production. Right, because that's how economics work. If nobody told you, I always use this reference. Like if your boss asks you to work 20 hours and you get paid half of what you normally do, you're going to say no thanks. Well, that's the same boat oil companies are in right now. Do you want to produce more and make less? No, nobody wants to, be more productive and make less. That just doesn't make any sense. So, this ultimately, this $60.26 a barrel price that we're seeing on our screen right now, and if you're following along on YouTube, you can see exactly the chart. But this is not going to bring more U.S. oil production. So President Trump again can make it easier for oil producers to drill and deregulate and make leasing, easier and less environmental burdens. But that doesn't directly translate into oil companies producing, especially against this backdrop.
Yeah. So at this particular point, and again, oil prices falling. Let me ask you this: are there triggers in place, like with Dow and a Nasdaq and whatnot, where if it falls a certain amount over a certain threshold of time, they stop selling? Like on for stocks, does the crude oil market have something like basically a technical break that they can say, okay, we're done selling for the day because the price is falling too much, or a consortium of days, or is there anything like that which would halt, like we can, or like
Yeah.
things happen on Wall Street?
Yeah, there are circuit breakers for the price of oil. Oil futures can be halted or paused if prices do move too sharply up or down due to market volatility. Again, it's a circuit breaker very similar to the one you just described. In this case, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, where WTI crude oil futures are traded, does have price limits on oil futures to curb like extreme volatility. I believe there's a static limit. If the price moves up or down by $10 a barrel from the previous day's settlement, the market pauses for 2 minutes. After that, it shifts to dynamic limits, which will adjust those constraints in real time to prevent huge swings. If the prices hit the limit and the volatility doesn't stop, trading can be halted temporarily. And again, same type of circuit breakers that you see with the stock market.
Have we hit any of those over the past week?
No, we haven't. Not to my knowledge. We haven't seen that. I mean, obviously, it happened. I mean, we saw huge price swings in April 2020, right, where futures went negative and then were paused. So we don't often see those large price swings, but we can.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Given the upper South, Midwest, basically Tornado Alley Plus, we've got OPEC Plus, we'll call it Tornado Alley Plus. Over the past couple of weeks, we have seen intense, severe weather over many states in the Midwest and upper South. Is that creating localized or regional pricing fluctuations because you've got people sheltering in place for several days, flooding, an awful lot of flooding that's taking place, so that's kind of created some interruptions in the regional markets, just all the way around. Are you seeing any kind of fluctuations in price points as a result of that, even on the wholesale market for gasoline?
Not
Demand,
really. I
if you
mean,
will.
the other headlines are so much more catastrophic. I mean, the tariff talk, OPEC raising production. This is the time of year when refinery issues, localized events can happen. But to my knowledge, the only refinery that's really in harm's way down in your neck of the woods would be a Valero refinery in Memphis. And to my knowledge, it is still operating. It hasn't experienced any downtime. Generally, severe weather is very localized. I think the one issue you'd have to look for is not so much flooding, unless I mean refineries do generally. The refinery in Memphis is on the Mississippi River, so
I've driven by
but
that. I know where you're talking about
but
now.
I'm not exactly sure. I don't think the Mississippi has risen to a level that would. I mean, I think the river level was very low. You probably know that better than I do.
It was. Yeah, the
So
Mississippi especially, but there are other refineries around the St. Louis. Aren't there oil
yeah,
refineries in the Metro
there's
East? And
there's one in Wood River
Mhm.
across in Illinois, but that one's a little bit far removed um,
I
from the
just know
river
that we've
itself.
had 4 digits worth of warnings: thunderstorm, tornado, and flash flood and flood warnings. Somewhere around 1,400 warnings in the past 5 days.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been a
impressive.
ridiculous amount. The point that I'm trying to get at is I know that it's created an interruption in just commerce. And it isn't totally
Normally,
local. It is actually something that has generated interruptions across multiple states because it was a multi-day event. This was not a cold front where you've got 2 hours worth of
right.
severe weather and then it's done. This went on for 5 days. And
And
so
to
it
your
did
point,
create an upset.
yeah, and to your point, most of those events are actually they're very limited on the impact to refineries. However, to your point, just like a hurricane I mean, hurricanes in Florida are not a market mover. There are no refineries in Florida.
Right.
But to your point, when over such a wide area, if there's massive disruptions, it does lead to demand destruction after an event because people can be displaced. People have to make significant changes if they've lost power. Their lives change. So a lot of the times after a major storm, it's not so much refinery destruction. It's more what we call demand destruction, where people aren't moving as much. To your point, commerce is impacted. If there's warehouses that are smashed by tornadoes, those trucks aren't moving. So a lot of the time after significant severe weather and or hurricanes, you actually have demand destruction, which can last for several weeks, which actually would then likely put downward pressure on prices. So it's major. A lot of the time, it's more so even more significant events like hurricanes. Now, last year we did see a tornado really very close to the ExxonMobil refinery in Joliet. So, I mean, if literally a tornado is destroying or hitting a refinery, that's problematic.
That
But
would be
those
bad.
chances are much lower than they would be for like a hurricane that is so much larger um, than say like a tornado or severe weather.
So basically, at this point, normally in this part of the podcast, I would start asking you, what do you forecast over the next 7 days? I don't think that's and I'm going to be really honest. I don't know that that's such a fair question to ask you right now, because how on earth? Here's a couple of darts, Patrick, and here's the board to start throwing stuff at, because we don't know moment to moment. I mean, this week, next time, the tariffs could all have been rescinded across the planet that the U.S. has issued, or they may be doubled. I
Right.
mean, and no, and in all honesty, literally, that could be, I just poof my brain, right? So, what are your thoughts? How about that? Instead of giving you a prediction to hold your feet to the fire with, what are some thoughts and some scenarios that would make the most sense for you, one way or the other?
Well, I think to your point, I mean, if you look at this heat map, by the way, of where gas prices have changed in the last month, you'll notice that there's been a huge drop in gas prices, Matt, in much of the Northeast, the New England area. Keep in mind, these areas of the Northeast, which are served by New York Harbor, they're about to make the transition over to summer gasoline in about a week. That's when pipeline specifications change. So the Northeast, you probably could see. I mean, if oil prices go up at all, you're probably going to start feeling that transition to summer gasoline. We've already seen that for areas of the Mid Atlantic, like Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. You've seen some increases because they move a little bit earlier than the rest of the Northeast. But to your point, it's really going to be based on tariffs where much of the country goes. I think for now, as we sit here, the national average is in a small decline overnight, down about a penny today, still up about a penny from last week. But I think the national average will start trending lower. We're probably going to see 35 or 40 states that will see gas prices go down over the next 7 days. But tariffs are the major catalyst for where we go, whether that's up or down for now. Because of the broad and extensive nature of tariffs, gas prices will likely go down. As we showed, the price of oil is down to $60. That's a huge drop. But the question is, will the tariffs be paused? Will they be reversed? If they do, we could slingshot back up. And like I said, there's nuances across the country with that transition to summer gasoline happening in the Northeast. There are nuances. So I'm going to say that this is such a volatile time. It really comes down to the state or region for where you're going to see gas prices go over the next week. Some places could go down, some places will go up. But I think in earnest, you'll see the national average is 40 cents below last year. I think eventually, when everything settles out, the national average will probably inch down over the next week or two. After that, I'd really like to see where tariffs are. If that situation has changed, we could eventually go back up. But for now, I think there's downward pressure at the pump.
Well, and I will give you a prime example of tariffs. I have a certain manufacturer that I work with when it comes to video production equipment, and I was getting ready to purchase a video camera, and with this particular company, and the price, because of the tariff over the past week, shot up $2,700 just for the tariff on this particular piece of equipment. So I said, yeah, we're going to hold off on that for just a little bit. And if I need to do something, I will rent a piece of gear before I spend nearly $3,000 simply in a tariff. There was nothing extra special about the gear. It didn't suddenly come with an extra something. That was literally the tariff bump. That is now in place for that particular piece of equipment and all of that manufacturer's pieces of equipment. So I'm like, yeah, we're going to hold off on that for just a little bit. And again, I'm having those conversations with multiple business owners in multiple different directions. So this is an area of concern, obviously, that impacts every single American, be it the consumer, be it the employee, be it a business owner, be it an oil analyst, be it Patrick DeHaan, right? This is going to be everybody's going to have an impact on this one way or the other. So we're going to keep a watchful eye on it. We'll make sure that we keep you informed of all the different nuances and scenarios that could possibly happen, and just try our very best to throw darts and see if we hit the bulls.
Spit on the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly. So you want to wrap us up out of here, Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Well, like I said, it's going to be a tumultuous time for the next week or two. Again, we have some exciting changes we'd like to talk to you about upcoming with the podcast. We haven't even talked about that, Matt.
Just tease, but we haven't really talked. You're right.
Yeah, but we do have some exciting changes coming to the podcast that we're looking forward to in the month of May. By the way, if you haven't already liked, follow, subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate it. But with that, Matt, I don't want to give too much away yet. I think we'll maybe get into it for next time. But we have some exciting changes coming in the podcast for the month of May.
Let's make that a little segment in next week's podcast for sure, and we'll have those conversations because I'm pretty excited about everything. You're excited about everything. The team behind Over a Barrel is very excited about all the changes. I mean, listen, it's a lot of fun, and I'm really.
We're gonna have new guests. We're gonna have a refreshed podcast experience. Yep. So an all new Over a Barrel, and like Matt said, we'll tease a little bit of that on the next week's episode. So for now, hold on to the pump. We could see gas prices going up or down. We'll do some specials if we have to. If we have to do a Twitter space or something like that. So make sure you follow me. I'm Gas Buddy Guy on X. He's Over a Barrel Matt on X. But for now, we will talk to you later down the road with any developments. So long.